Hello everyone, and welcome back to Tutorials of Tone. My name is Alex. Thank you so much for watching this video. Our topic for today, turning your favorite electric bass into a synth bass, or thereabouts. This tactic was brought up to me by a colleague and friend of mine that I have had the pleasure of playing with over the last several years, Mr. Ian Allison of Scott's Bass Lessons fame. Ian is an amazing player and an even more brilliant sound designer. Now, while he's on the HX Stomp and has his presets readily available, I figured we'd have a little bit of fun with his approaches within the Fractal system, using the 4 key components that make this so wonderful: drive, pitch, filter, and modulation. We're going to dive into each component and see what we can get out of our favorite Fractal device, whether we're on the FM3, the FM9, or the FX3. Let's dive in. For this video, I will be using my red Bongo 5-string made by Music Man. This is my favorite bass ever made, and it is a blessing to play this anytime I get to fill some low end. Our preset here is seemingly complicated, but we'll dive into all the things that we need here. First up, our input block. Everything is at stock settings except the threshold of our gate. It's at negative 47.5 dB. This is a carryover from how I like having my guitar set up, but you absolutely do not need to adhere to this. Now, next up in our chain, and the most crucial element to taking our E-bass into key bass territory, the drive block. You've got to change the waveform from this typical sine wave that your electric bass would be creating to something a little more sawtooth, square, even a triangle wave. You're changing the wave shape to get it a little more synthetic, a little less organic, as your electric bass would provide. With our octave engaged, our standard bass tone would sound like this. And with our fuzz, now, as you can see, not a lot of drive here. The more drive you introduce, the more it really starts to sound like electric bass with fuzz. But with just a hint of fuzz to change the waveform and to introduce that element of wave shaping, we now have a little bit more synthetic tone. Make sure that your mix is set to 100%. If you set that anywhere else, you're starting to reintroduce that sine wave of your clean bass, and you won't get the full effect of the key bass thing. You can turn up the drive as you please, but know that you'll probably get something a little more fuzzy. So, dial that into taste. There is a lot to dive into here. This shapes your overall key sound. So, dabble with the tone, change that around. Maybe you want to dial it way back. Up a little more. Now, just the drive and the tone knob can have drastic implications down the line. This is huge to dial in and to get to your specifications. You also have the tone page, where I have quite a bit of low cut and an insane amount of high cut. We could take that off. Reintroduce it. This can also be really fun with a fretless bass, if you have one available. You also have a graphic EQ section that you can absolutely engage. And then an advanced setting, you could take this bit reduce and go nuts. Maybe not that far. Or that far. You're getting a little chiptune-y there. really getting into that synthetic territory when you reduce the bit rate. But there's a little bit of a dabble into the drive. Next up in the chain, after our fuzz, after we've shaped the wave, we now bring up octave divider, or the octave pedal. You can have an absolute blast with this. In this instance, I'm just using 1 octave down, but you could go full polyphonic octave generator, the electroharmonics pedal, 2 octaves up, octave 2 octaves down, create this massive wall of sound. Sky's the limit here. You could also have 5th above. You could incorporate so many different ideas. When using a pitch block, make sure you set your mix accordingly. In this instance, I have my mix in series set to 37.5%. So what that means is if I have 100% of my dry signal, I have 75% of that affected signal mixed in, creating 37.5% of my total signal. That, again, sounds like this. If you took that all the way up, really starts to sound almost like a ring modulator. Perhaps we go to 50% in the ballpark. And back where we had it. This is just one of the many ways you can affect your tone using pitch. Now I mentioned you can go crazy with this. Well, we have that pulled up. This is full P.O.G, octave above and below, 2 octaves above and below, mixed in at 37.5%. Sounds like this. This is super cool. You can get organ-like sounds. You can get this big, larger-than-life synth thing that you normally couldn't get out of just a standard bass and your natural technique. And as I mentioned, you could just do a 5th above and make things really thick sounding. Just beware of the range, as the lower you go, the muddier it gets. Next up in our chain, the filter section. This is great. This is so much fun and really brings this synthy sound to life. You can, of course, attach this to an expression pedal and control everything with your foot. You could set it up to an LFO or sequencer and get the most out of your system that way without affecting your playing style. In our case, I've pulled up a little bit of an auto wah. Now, you see that 2 blocks engage, and we'll get to that. But let's hear it first. Pop, pop, it's showtime. When you bring this thing in, the game just changes. And what's really cool about it is it's a composite. It's the best of both worlds. It's a way to blend that filtered sound with your natural bass thing. So, as I've said, both blocks engage the wah and the filter. So first, we have our wah here, frequency min 315, my birthday, and the frequency max 600, very low. But we're playing in a low range and we don't need a lot of wah sound. We just whoa. Just a quick little move of that filter. We have an envelope follower. More on setting that up in another video. And then to blend that in with our other tone, we have this set to -10 dB. When you're combining 2 signals, make sure that they both come down a little bit so your overall sound is unity gain. For our filter block, we have a low pass filter here. As you can see, anything above like 1K, completely gone and out of the mix. If we were to delete that block, our bass tone would sound like this now. This filter block really allows us to retain our bass function without losing that super cool effect on the top end of the spectrum. You could also use a completely different style of filtering effect using a phaser. Really cool having that MuTron sort of thing going on in here. But I digress. Now let's not forget, we are also running all of this into an amp and a cab. We're using an SVT bass head here with very moderate settings, except our output EQ has the nice little Dave LaRue hump to give us more definition. We're running all of that into a pair of SV bass cab IRs, an 810 and a 410 with an M88. Without all of our effects turned on, our dry bass amp sounds like this. With everything engaged, night and day. They're not the same, right? It's easy to lose perspective when you're deep diving on this stuff, but feel free to turn everything off and just hear your organic bass tone again, because when you sit in a mix, you're going to hear it. Up next in our chain, modulation. Now, this is often not thought of when we're going for that synth or key-based thing, but this can really change the perception and maybe the garnishing of our tone. So with our chorus turned on, really fun stuff. Really adds a new dimension, no pun intended, a new character to this bass sound, and really brings you into that world of synth bass. With everything engaged, you could sound like this. Completely changed and transformative from the original bass sound. But as Ian Allison would say, don't sleep on that reverb. Throughout our entire example thus far, we have been using a medium room reverb. Just a little bit of squish in there. But for our purposes, let's dial in a little bit more with Music Hall. And you can create these big sonic tapestries with your reverb. We've heard a lot of examples so far, but this is really just scratching the surface. I mean, you could dive into the drive block, change all these different parameters of the fuzz, and really go hard into shaping that waveform into what is affected down the line. With the pitch block, you have any number of things that you could do in there. Octaves, different harmonies, like I did with a fifth. You could have something like Steve Vai's Ballerina 1224, where you're adding delay to each of those pitch modifications and harmonies and having them ping pong within time. You could take a different filter and do a pop sweep with an LFO or with an expression pedal, as I've described in other guitar-related videos. You could have stereo effects. You could have that auto wad thing on the left, but a MuTron phaser on the right, and process them completely differently. You could take a different modulation effect, a flanger, a wider chorus. You could take plex delay and have these chimey highs. You could have a completely different reverb or delays and play off of delays. The sky's the limit with this synth-based stuff. But don't forget, you're still playing an electric bass. And there are a lot of really cool opportunities with that. With passive basses, you can select different pickups. So for all of these examples, I've been using the bridge pickup with my EQ entirely flat. But if you switch to the neck pickup, really different sound. Now I'm going to go back to the bridge pickup and do what I normally do, which is roll the treble down on my onboard EQ with the bongo. Roll it in to taste. It really changes the game when you start thinking like an E-bass player within the synth bass realm. And you can combine and marry those two properties to get the most out of your unit. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you liked it, and I hope you did, there are plenty more videos on my channel, whether they're bass related or guitar, tutorials of tone, Fractal 101s, gear reviews, playthroughs, lessons, everything in between. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you all next time.